Uh-huh. How long do you want this to be?
Till we get started.
Well, okay.
Today is May 10th,
May 10th.
1989.
Right.
My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. A.
My first name is Adolph, but no one ever calls me that. On board ship, they call me Mort. But all my friends have always called me A.D. I go by the initials A.D.
A.D. Mortensen.
Mortensen, right.
Okay. And we're in Wilmington, North Carolina, and you live in?
We live in Oakland, California.
Oakland, California. Okay. So where were you born?
In Oakland.
Oakland.
Still there.
And when's your birthday?
Oh, well, April 10th. I should say 1916.
1960.
Mm-hmm. That makes me 73.
73. And
Is this on now?
Mhm.
Oh, it is. Okay. All right.
You went through school in Oakland?
Yeah, I went through the public schools in Oakland, and then I graduated from UC Berkeley. I have a degree in mechanical engineering from Berkeley, and I had also taken naval ROTC. This was the reason I was an ensign on board the Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. And you went into the Navy in what year?
I went into the Navy. The first day of active duty was January the 6th of 1941. My wife and I were married on the 1st of January 41. So I had my orders and had a new wife and almost a new commission and a degree all at the same time. And my first station was at Pennsylvania State College. It's now State University in State College, Pennsylvania, where I took a course in diesel engineering. And then I went to the Oklahoma sometime in June of 41. I can't pinpoint the exact date because those orders are gone.
Did you request the Oklahoma?
No, I didn't. You didn't request anything in those days. You were assigned. They were building up the ship. You could tell when I arrived. I think it was only around 950 a complement, and I think they were going to try to get it to 1,100 or 1,150.
And you went aboard where?
In Honolulu.
Oh, okay.
And Pearl Harbor, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Why had you decided to go into the Navy instead of the
Well,
Army?
it was compulsory to take ROTC in those days, and I thought I'd rather ride the waves and walk on my feet in the Army. So I had a choice of going into Naval ROTC, which was kind of an elite unit compared to the Army.
Mm-hmm. Anything happened on the trip to Hawaii?
No, nothing. Nothing very interesting.
Did you think we'd get involved in the war?
I think everybody should have had a little inkling or a premonition that this could occur, because all you had to do was, we didn't have television in those days, but you could listen to the radio and read the newspapers, and you knew that the Japanese couldn't keep going the way they had been going without somebody eventually saying no to them, and or they're going to run up against a brick wall, and I guess it was a brick wall on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had gone into Manchuria, they had gone into Korea, and I can remember seeing the old news programs when you went to the theater, before the main show ever started, the main movie, the feature program. They always have a news, and you would see the Japanese planes bombing Shanghai and so forth and so on. So you had a sense that things were going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And you were assigned to which division?
I was the junior officer in the B division. That's the boiler division.
Mm-hmm. And what were your duties?
I was more or less in a learning status at that particular time. We had another ensign who had graduated from the Naval Academy in the class of 40, and I had graduated from Berkeley in the class of 40, so we were both the same age, and we just got along beautifully. Of course, he knew a lot more than I did, and I was just learning, that's all.
Where were your quarters?
In the junior officers area of the ship, which is in the bow of the ship. On the second deck, as I recall correctly.
Could you give me just a good description of your quarters?
Well, the quarters are, it was a relatively small stateroom, and of course the ship there was 2 bunks in there, and my roommate was the junior aviator on board, and he was a kid who had graduated from UC Berkeley, although I didn't know him. UC Berkeley at that time only had about 15 or 16,000 students, but still that was a lot of students compared to what it is now. It's not very many. But Maury, and I don't remember his first name, as I say, was a junior aviator on board, and when we were both in bed when on that Sunday morning when the word went out that we were under attack, a little more than that.
Yeah. Before we get there, what was you said you were in charge of the boiler division?
Yes.
What were your duties?
Oh, my duties were, I was actually the officer in the forward boiler control, and the main boiler control is where the division officer stayed, and it was just to see that the fire rooms were in operation, the boilers were lit when they were supposed to be, and you were delivering the amount of steam that the engines required, that the bridge wanted. You gave the steam to run the engines and to give a certain amount of speed to the ship. And the more speed they wanted, the more steam that you had to provide.
Any idea how many gallons of oil the Oklahoma held?
I would hesitate to say. I just don't recall.
Yeah, okay. Did you have any extra duties, like officer of the day? Or
Yeah, I was. Oh yes. Well, everybody had that. I was. As a matter of fact, I didn't get to bed before 4 a.m. on the 7th of December because I was the junior officer of the deck. And in addition to that, I was the educational officer on board, and there was a number of kids who wanted to get their high school diploma, and I would help them with that type of thing. And there was a few of them that wanted to go on to universities, and I think there was 1 or 2 that wanted to even go to the Naval Academy, and they had to pass a test and so forth and so on, and I would help them with their studies.
So, what did you do December 6th?
On December 6th? I don't recall, but I thought that we had just come in, either on the 5th or the 6th we came in, and I presume we were more or less beginning to clean up the ship, because as I understand there was going to be a big inspection as I remember, there was a big inspection to occur Monday morning.
And I was told all the hatches were open, everything being cleaned.
Yeah, that's what I understand also, that the hatches were open, and because it was an engineering type or a hull type inspection, they crawled in and out of all of the places in the hull. They wanted to see whether there was any rust or junk or rags or whatever or laying around in these various places.
So start with December 7th, and what happened?
Well, as I told you, I had been the JOOD, and I didn't get to bed before 4 a.m. So Sunday was my day off. My plans were to have a leisurely breakfast, and the JO mess was open till 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings in port if there wasn't anything special going on. And I had family friends. There was a family who lived in Honolulu that his mother and father were Alameda people, and my folks were friends of his folks, and he was an engineer for the Honolulu Water Department, and it was like a family away from home. And I would go and spend the weekend with them, or Sundays, and have Sunday dinner there, or go to church with them, this kind of thing. Or go swimming in the afternoon, and this was what I had planned to do. But at just about 6 minutes to 8, I guess I was almost awake anyway, but the word was passed over the PA system, and I may not remember it exactly correctly. Air raid, get moving, this is no drill. And then there was an expletive. I don't know. It said no shit. But I recognize Ensign Herb Rommel's voice. And when an ensign came on the PA system, as opposed to a bosun's mate or a quartermaster, you knew right away that there was something unusual. And I guess I said to myself, this is no baloney. This is the real thing. And Maury, my roommate, and he had the lower bunk. I had the upper one. I think he got a little more air, and I had about a 6 or 7 months superior. I guess that's a term, is it? No, I don't remember. I was above him anyway by 6 months, and so I had the choice. And I had PJ bottoms on. I don't remember what Maury had on, but anyway, he went down one way, and I went the other way. And my stateroom was on the port side forward, and so I had to cross over. To get to my battle station, I had to cross over to the starboard side, and I know Maury went down the port side. And so I had just stepped into the JO mess, right next to the #1 turret barbette. And when the first explosion hit, first torpedo hit, and that explosion, I couldn't believe it. It probably lifted that ship, which is a 29,000-ton ship, over from the height of the floor to the table, just a big whoom, just like this. And then it slowly sank down again. And that's really the only explosion I can remember. I can remember #1, but I know there were many more after that. And so I did go back through the warrant officer country, which was always so nice and clean, because there was very few warrant officers, and they always kept things immaculate in that spot. Into B Division living compartments, and then down through the armor-plated hatch to the forward boiler control. And when I got there, by the time I got there, there was maybe a 10 or 15 degree list to the ship, and it increased very slowly till it didn't go to 45. I think most people say it went to 45, but we were standing on the deck. We weren't standing where the bulkhead would meet the deck if it were 45, or standing on the bulkhead. We were still standing on the deck. And I think it probably increased to as much as 30 degrees, 35 degrees at the very, very most. But the lights were blinking, going on and off, and the place just filled up with smoke. And that was the worst, because as the torpedoes hit and the ventilation system was still on, and in the boiler rooms, we had a lot of ventilation. You had to have a lot of ventilation down there, because especially in the boiler rooms, and because all of that, those fires take a lot of oxygen to keep them going. And so when I got down there, the lights would kind of flicker on and off, and I don't think we really knew what to do. And I don't even recall if we really had any communications with after boiler control. But it wasn't too long. It might have been 2-3 minutes when somebody came through I can still see that today. The hatch being unlocked, undogged, and they are coming through from the after boiler control, main boiler control, forward boiler control. And here was a division officer, and there was 3 or 4 men, including a machinist. And he said, abandon ship. And fortunately, the armor-plated deck was just about over our heads, and by this time the ladder was almost at the verge of just beginning to swing. This armor-plated deck, which is armor plating about that thick, was hinged on the proper side, on the port side, because I can still see this fellow unloosening that last dog, and that hatch going whoom. It was a massive, heavy thing. It was spring-loaded, If the thing was level, you'd have to push it down, and it was, no one could lift the thing. It had to be helped by a series of springs. And so we scrambled up to the main second deck. That was B Division compartment. And when we got there, I looked around, and here there must have been at least 3 or 4 or more lined up between 3 or 4 portholes that were in the B Division living compartment, and they were trying to feed them through. They were pushing and pulling from the outside, I presume, standing on the side of the hull. And I remember this is the last time, and I think I was perhaps about the last person to see the chaplain, and he had, I understand, he had tried to get through, but he was too big to get through an 11-inch porthole. And of course, it's very hard to get through a porthole when you're dry and you got your clothes on. And I can still see fellows halfway through with their legs just kicking all over the place. You know, you can't get a purchase to get out. If there was somebody outside helping them out, fine, then they could probably make it. But as we well, we didn't know what to do, and finally Joe Hidorf, the division officer, said, let's try to get back to chief's quarters. They got 15-inch portholes back there. Fine. I don't think I'd ever been into, I've been into chief quarters about once, but I didn't know that they, or remember that they had 15-inch portholes. And so we started back. And it was kind of hard walking because the deck was slippery. See, the mess tables were still set up, and they hadn't cleared the mess gear. Plates and dishes and cups of coffee and garbage was just all over the place. And the bunks that were always attached to the wall were swinging. They were just on a kind of a hook arrangement. They'd fold up against the bulkhead during the day, and at night they'd drop them down. They had chains, and these things were swinging. And we went by a bunch of fellows who were trying to get through the escape hatch in the large deck hatch, which is overhead. And I thought to myself, well, if they want to get out, why don't they just undo the entire hatch instead, the deck hatch, instead of just going through this little teeny escape hatch one at a time? But you didn't have enough time to say anything or to react, and so I kept going. And we got to a place that was called a crossover, where you could see one side of the ship and the other side of the ship. And this is where the galley areas were. They had these great big, you could almost call them a cauldron. They were a pot where they would cook their oatmeal cereal in the morning, you know, and the beans and so forth and so on. Right at that area, it was also where the medical dispensary was located. First it was a doctor's office, then, as I recall, an operating room. These two were locked. And then the medical dispensary, and then there was a sick bay. Sick bay perhaps had a dozen beds in it, I guess. I don't think I was ever in the sick bay, but I'd been in the medical dispensary because that's where you got the shots. And so just when I came opposite this, the ship rolled all the way. She started to roll slowly and went all the way over. And the water came in, and I said to myself, you can't do anything about this. I can't fight it, so I started treading water. And I let the water take me just where it was going to take me. And it just took me through the hatchway, or the doorway. This was a doorway into the medical dispensary. And just as I was going through, I remember all the medicines that was in the dispensary and the cabinet. The cabinet was painted white with glass doors. The doors popped open, and I got a shower of the medicine bottles, pills, and, you know, they didn't break or anything, but I did get the shower of this stuff. And I kept treading water, and finally, it's a very funny sensation to see the deck rolling up and then over you. And this was a portion of the ship that had those little old-fashioned hexagon tiles. You know, they were about an inch in diameter. And finally, it stopped rolling, but then we had a triangle of air, and I said to myself, boy, I hope this thing is a watertight compartment, that it will build up an air pressure and to hold the water down. And finally, the water level started slowing up, and we found ourselves in this little triangle of air. It might have been 30 inches on a side like this and 8 feet long. And there were 5 of us in there. We had light because the warrant carpenter, a fellow named John Austin, never went any place without a 5-cell flashlight. And he managed to keep that dry, evidently, because we did have light. And I looked around, and there was a total of 5 of us, treading water, holding onto the bulkhead. And I knew there was a porthole in that compartment, and I reached down and I could barely reach down. I don't remember now if I put my head underwater or not, but I reached down for the dog wrench. In each compartment there's supposed to be a wrench so you can undo the clips that hold the ports. And on the old battleships there were two portholes. There was the glass porthole that went down first, and then there was a battle port that was a very heavy bronze affair that covered that over. Well, normally when the ship was upright, the battle port was held up with a hook, and then you'd have the glass port. If you wanted to open the glass port for air, it just folded down. But now since the ship was upside down, well, let me come back just a little bit. I reached for the a little device that holds the wrench next to the port, and there wasn't one there. And so I said to myself, I hope this is only hand-dogged. And I tried it with my fingers, and sure enough, I could open them. And as I recall, there was two. There might be three, but I think there was two, one on each side. And I remember when the last one went off, that battle point went whoop. It opened of its own accord because it was upside down. And then all I had to do was to hold up the glass port. I opened it and held it. I could just barely hold it. And I remember saying, "Who's first?" And there was a fellow I didn't know who went, a kid about 19, who went down, and I felt him wiggling around. I couldn't see what he was doing, but I sensed because he was brushing my knees. And he later told me, and I didn't meet this fellow until 1981, I met him, and that he made 2 or 3 stabs before he could do it. He said he tried to go head first, and then he tried to go arms first, and finally he went one arm at a time. And but he got through. And we didn't know what was on the outside, naturally. We just knew it was out. And so I didn't even have to say, "Who's next?" There was a big, tall, skinny kid from our division. And he hadn't been on board too long, but his name was Kellogg. And he was down there and wiggled out through that port like it was he was all greased. And so I said to myself, if he can do it, then I can do it. And then there was a mess attendant from the senior wardrobe, and he was a boy from Guam. I don't remember his name or anything, but he was praying. And I looked at him, and I said, "You're next." He shook his head and said, "No." And I assumed that any boy from Guam could swim. So I just took his head, and I pushed it down by the porthole, and he went out. And by this time, the air was almost gone. The oxygen was almost gone. There's still a little spot of air there. And the warrant officer, John Austin, probably weighed about 200 pounds, 210 pounds. And he didn't say anything, but he just came over and reached down and held the port for me. And I tried to get some, hyperventilate, get some air in my lungs. And I sensed there was stale air. And so I said to myself, I've got to get out of here in a hurry. This isn't going to last very long. And so I went down, went through one arm this way, and easy enough to get my shoulders through. But the hips, unfortunately, unfortunately I only had PJ bottoms on, and I think that's where I lost my PJs because they were gone. And but I left a little skin, I think, on the sides of the porthole, but I did get out. And then I opened my eyes and looked up. I was a good swimmer, and it wasn't. I knew the sky was up there, but it wasn't green and it wasn't blue, and it didn't occur to me what might be on the surface of the water. It was a kind of a golden brown. And so I pushed off from the side of the ship, kicked off from the side of the ship, and it was a long way up there. I almost lost my breath. And I would say it's probably 15, 16, 17, or 18 feet from the porthole onto the surface of the water. And when I hit the surface, looked around, here was half a dozen fellows hanging onto the side of a ship, maybe about 10 feet away, because what was on a slope like this, the port here, and water level up here when you had a distance to swim, not 10 feet, maybe at the very most 8 feet. And here a bunch of tar babies. Well, 6 inches of oil on the surface of the water. And so I swam over and joined the group, and I couldn't recognize a soul, but one fellow, an ensign named McClellan, recognized me, which even surprises me today. So we stayed there for a short period of time, not knowing what to do, and there was a 40-foot Navy motor launch with 3 Marines on board, maybe 50, 60 yards out, and they wouldn't come in. They were kind of just circling out there, and finally they began to come in, but they wouldn't come in all the way for some reason, and they didn't come in, and I swam out. I probably swam out 20 yards, and they came in that far, and one fellow reached down and tried to help me get up to the side of the ship, but I slipped off twice. I remember that. And finally, he got to squeeze enough oil off of me so I could get one hand over the gunwale, and then I kicked my a leg over and got on board. I was the first one on board that motor launch, and it was spotless. It was spotless. I felt real sorry to mess up his boat. I tried to stand up, but my feet just went out from under me, and then I sat down. And I don't know if they picked up all of the fellows or not, but finally, and it didn't take very long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, they didn't want to hang around there. They took off for the Mary's Point landing, and I went up to the receiving ship. But on the way in, one of the Marines, there were 3 of them, one of the Marines took a look at me. I don't know if he didn't like what he saw, but he took his trousers off, took his skivvies off, handed me his skivvies, and put his pants back on. And then I went up to the receiving ship. They said, go up and take a shower. And they had 2, as I recall, they had 2 big shower rooms up there, like in a gym shower. And there was already 4 or 5 inches of water on the floor of that shower and a little thin film of oil. And they had 2 5-gallon cans of kerosene, and you'd take a rag and put some kerosene and wash yourself off. Well, you were 90% clean, I guess. And that's the story of my escape from the inside of the hull of the Oklahoma. I think perhaps I was about the last person out under my own power, and they cut 32 more out after I came out.
How long were you inside the ship, you know?
I just have to guesstimate, but I think I was probably in, from the time GQ was called to the time I came out through the porthole, maybe 18, 19 minutes.
And what deck were you on when?
That would be from the second deck.
The second deck.
The second deck. Mm-hmm.
And do you recall any sounds when the ship was turning over?
No, there was no sounds.
Mm-hmm.
It was quiet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There had been some explosions, you know. As I say, I lost count. I can remember that first explosion. That was all. The others after that was just it just blend in. Now there were some fellows that were in positions where they could do nothing but sit there and count those explosions.
What were you thinking as the ship was turning over?
My thought was that I can't fight this. I just might as well tread water and let let this water take me where it's going to take me, and then I'll see what I can do after I got there.
You think you'd get out?
I don't remember myself being any kind of a panic, so I must have, and since I saw fellows going out through the other porthole, if I found myself in a compartment that had a porthole and there was enough air, I'm sure that I could have gotten out. So I wasn't, I don't know the word to use, really.
You never thought you wouldn't get out?
I never thought I wouldn't get out.
Okay.
Yeah. I was a newly married person. I wanted to see my wife again.
Whenever you hit the surface, were the Japanese still attacking?
They were still attacking, yes. Yeah. Yeah, you could see, the sky was cluttered with um, AA fire, the bursts. And there were planes. And as a matter of fact, after I got cleaned up at the receiving ship, they said, go pick yourself out some clothes. And there was a pile of dungarees and an old pile of shoes. And I think I got myself a pair of tennies that must have been about size 14 when I wear a size 9.5. And I put on a pair of dungaree trousers and a dungaree shirt. And I went outside to see what was happening. And I just walked around the corner of the receiving ship building, and here come a Zero right down through the main gate of Pearl Harbor, just with his machine gun going right down the main road into the Navy Yard. And so I got my nose back inside in a hurry. And the bullets were, his bullets were hitting the pavement not more than 20, 30 feet from me. Then right after that, I went down to the dock, and I ran into two fellows off the Oklahoma. One was Ensign Demers, and the other was a Lieutenant J.G. Bill Ingram. And where Bill got these, I don't know, but he had two pearl-handled revolvers. He was a character. Bill was the nephew of, I don't know if he was a son or, I know he's related to Wild Bill Ingram, who was the football coach at the Naval Academy. And so he commandeered a Navy motor whaleboat. A fellow, I don't remember who this boat belonged to, but the bosun really objected to him taking it, and he said, you're going to take us out to the Oklahoma. So we went out to the Oklahoma, and by this time the attack was just about over. And the warrant bosun, and then a fellow named, what was his name? Bothke, who was out there, and Commander Kenworth was out there. Kenworthy, he was the executive officer. He was there, still in whites, and he'd walked over the bottom of the ship, and there was a half a dozen more, and we asked if we could do anything. They said no. Hey, get out of here. And so we went back, and then we found out that the Oklahoma crew was gathering at the sub base. And so I walked over to the sub base, but on the way, I thought, well, now I found a nickel. On the way, I found a nickel. And I was going to call my friends that lived in town. And so I dropped this nickel into a telephone in the sub base, the first telephone that I came to, and the damn thing was out of order, and I lost my nickel. But that gave me an idea. I went through the coin boxes, and I did find a dime in one of the coin boxes. And so I made sure I got a good phone the next time. And so I called the Hefties, and they were very glad to hear me, and they said they were going to get the names of a couple of other boys that were local from the Alameda and Oakland area and send a telegram, which they did. And then I went up to where the Oklahoma was gathering, and the first thing they put under my nose was a sheet of paper, and they said, sign your name. And they had the roster there. And as I recall, I was about 150. And then the second thing they did was give me a couple of pieces of paper and a pencil, and they said, sit down and write your story. And I guess this was good to do this, to keep us busy. And so I sat down and wrote a story. And this was only about 11 o'clock, 11:30 on Sunday morning. I know it was prior to noontime because they gave us sandwiches at lunchtime. I remember that. And I don't remember what I wrote or how long it was or anything, but I wrote that and turned it in. And then in the afternoon, I ran into a friend of mine who had been in Naval ROTC with me at Berkeley, and he had a room up in the sub-base BOQ. And he says, well, you might as well come up and bunk with me because my roommate is out on a cruise. And so I spent one night in the sub-base in a room, and then the second night I moved up in the sub-base tower. They had a kind of a bunk room up in the tower, and there's perhaps 8 beds up there, and then I stayed up there and bunked up there for about the next 3 months. And on, I don't remember, it was Sunday afternoon. It was probably Sunday afternoon, it might have been Monday morning, but they said, we want 4 ensigns. And they looked. The fellow who said this was looking at me, and so they selected. I was one. Ensign Demers was another off of the Oklahoma, and then there was a boy off of the West Virginia, Ed Burchill, and another fellow off of the Castle of the Downs, Wesley. Can't even think of his last name now. It was many years ago. You're to report to SINCPAC headquarters, and we did. So I was Admiral Kimmel's staff for one day, and then Admiral Kimmel was relieved, and so I was on Pye's staff then for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then I was on Admiral Nimitz's staff. And we were in a special operations unit in which we had headphones on. We were connected to every post around Oahu, the Army, the various airfields, the police department, and so forth. And there was a couple of coast watchers, I guess you'd call it. And we had a big map in front of us, and if anything undue occurred, we were to make a notation and put pins here and there, and if anything really undue occurred, we called for the operations office. They came in and out all the time anyway, including Admiral Nimitz. And so then in May, sometime in May of 42, I was sent down to Auckland, New Zealand to join Admiral Gormley's staff. And then Admiral Gormley was relieved by Halsey, and then I was on Halsey's staff until just about March 1st of 44, and then I came home and went to the Naval Academy and took a course in aerological engineering at the postgraduate school. And after that, I went to the brand new Princeton, the CV-37 that was being commissioned in Philadelphia. And then the war came to an end, and I wanted to stay in the Navy, and my wife wanted to get out, so we got out.
Were you with the Battle of Coral Sea?
No, I was not in the Battle of Coral Sea. That took place when I was en route to Auckland, New Zealand, on a little seaplane tender called U.S.S. Mackinac. That the only reason I was able to get on and get these friends of mine on was that I knew and was a classmate of the engineering officer, because the skipper had turned me down on going down to Auckland. And the reason he turned me down is because Admiral Richard E. Byrd was on board with a very small staff of 2 or 3 people, and they were making an inspection and evaluation tour of all of the islands that were not occupied by the Japanese that they could go to. So that I was fortunate enough to visit Palmyra and Johnson Island. And I don't remember if we went to the Howland Islands or not, no, I don't think we did, but we went to both the Samoas, we went into the Tongas, we went to the Fijis, and we went up into the New Hebrides. This was before any of, the Japanese were just over the horizon. And then finally down to Auckland, New Zealand. But I talked on many occasions with Admiral Richard Byrd.
Did you think the Japanese would invade? Why?
Well, I think they made their big mistake, and they realized it at the time. I don't think they realized that they were going to be so successful.
Did you do any preparations for the invasion?
Did they?
No, did the Americans?
No, I don't think they. No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so. Not as far as Admiral Nimitz and his staff was concerned. No. Of course, the defense of
now, this is right after December 7th and 8th.
That's right. The defense of the islands, including the defense of Pearl Harbor, was an Army function, which seems kind of strange, but it was. Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Admiral Kimmel and General Short were treated fair?
No.
Were they scapegoats?
They were scapegoats, just like Ollie North is.
Yeah. Did that ruin their careers?
Oh, certainly. Sure.
What happened to them?
Oh, they were, as far as Admiral Kimmel was concerned, I think he was just kind of relieved. Well, he was relieved of all duties, and eventually he came back to the States, and I know that he tried to clear his name. He was court-martialed, Both he and Short went on. They had Navy courts of inquiry, and I don't remember, and they had congressional and presidential. all kinds of inquiries just went on, 3 or 4 or 5 of them. And, I guess they had to find somebody to.
Did you know Kimmel?
Well, I was only on staff for 1 day, but I felt sorry. Yes, he came in, he was hanging over that board, very frequently. Maybe that first day he was in there once an hour.
What kind of man was he?
He was a gentleman.
Whenever you could see the upturned hull of the Oklahoma, what was your reaction?
You mean right after?
Yeah.
I guess it was, wow.
And today, whenever anyone mentions the Oklahoma, what's your reaction?
Well, I always think of the friends we lost.
You okay? If I can ask, what's your fondest memory of the Oklahoma?
That's pretty hard to say.
You want to wait a few minutes?
No, I never thought of any of the question in that regard of fondest memories. It was a good ship. The fellows on board were great people. That's about all.
May not be a fair question, but how would you compare the Oklahoma to other ships?
Well, I think they were pretty much all equal. Yeah.
Anything else?
We had the first skipper we had, Captain Foy, was a real gentleman. He was a very nice fellow. The executive officer was a very nice fellow, but the last skipper wasn't too nice.
Who's that?
Captain Bodie. He
I-
he finally committed suicide.
I've heard a story. Can't confirm it, but I understand that Captain Foy and his wife loaded the trunk of their car with just everything: toothpaste, toothbrushes. Went around looking for Oklahoma survivors, and they would give them.
I can't confirm that either. I just don't know, but
because everybody I've talked to said he was a gentleman.
if somebody said that, if 2 people said that, it is true.
Anything else about the Oklahoma? Any incident you can recall?
Not really. I wasn't on there all that long.
What major maneuvers were you on with the Oklahoma?
Oh gosh. Any and every maneuver that they had between the time I got on and the time she rolled over, including night maneuvers which took place just a few days before the 7th, and I remember all of a sudden the engines reversing themselves, and we took a portion of the rail of the Nevada off, And then another incident, we were coming back to the States for R&R. I'd only been on board a short period of time, but the rest had been on longer. And our way back to San Francisco, I think we're going back to Long Beach. And about 500 miles off the coast, there was a big pop, and the propeller shaft broke, and they almost lost a screw. It came out. And I remember Bothke having to put on a diving suit, and he went down, put some cables around the prop so she wouldn't go all the way. And well, then we went into Hunters Point in San Francisco, and that was nice because my wife was home in Oakland.
Why did that shaft break?
Why did it break? Metal fatigue of some description, I presume.
How big is that shaft?
Yeah, I would say it's perhaps, well, you know, it was more like a pipe. It wasn't a solid. 18 inches in diameter.
Oh, so the shaft is not solid.
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is May 10th,